still remember the moment they told me I was being let go. It was raining that morning. The kind of slow, steady rain that makes everything quiet. I had just finished my second cup of coffee, getting ready for the weekly team meeting when my phone buzzed with a message from HR. "Can you come to the conference room at 10? It's important." I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe it was about the new client proposal I'd been working on for months. But when I stepped into that room and saw the faces, our HR manager, the new vice president, and someone from legal, my heart started beating faster. They asked me to sit down. The VP looked uncomfortable, but also distant, like he'd already moved on to the next thing. Then he said the words that still echo in my head. "We've reviewed the situation and, unfortunately, we have to let you go." Just like that. No explanation. No real chance to speak. Only polite, cold faces and a folder slid across the table with separation details. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I asked what situation they were talking about. That's when they told me they believed I had leaked confidential client data, the kind of mistake that could cost the company millions. I remember staring at them, completely frozen. I couldn't even form words for a few seconds. I had been with the company for almost 9 years. 9 years of loyalty. Late nights, weekends, fixing problems I didn't even cause. I had mentored half the team sitting in that office. And now, suddenly, I was a liability. A name on a report that said terminated. The VP avoided eye contact. HR said, "We're so sorry this happened, but our policy doesn't allow discussion once the decision is made." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. All I could say was, I didn't do it. They nodded like they'd heard it all before. Then the meeting was over. I walked out of the building with my small box of things, my mug, my photos. The rain was heavier now. I stood under the awning for a long time, trying to understand how everything I'd worked for could disappear in a single morning. That was the day my world collapsed. But it was also the day something new began, something I didn't know I had in me. A quiet, patient strength. And yes, a little bit of revenge. Underscore 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 underscore. When I first joined the company, I was 26. Fresh out of grad school, full of hope. It wasn't a huge company back then, maybe 30 people in total. I started as a junior account manager, doing small client calls, organizing presentations, and trying to prove myself. My boss at the time, Lisa, believed in me. She used to say, "You have the kind of calm energy clients trust." That meant a lot, because I wasn't the loudest or the most confident person in the room. But I listened, I cared, and I worked harder than anyone. Over the years, the company grew. We won bigger clients, international brands. And with that came promotions, longer hours, and new faces. Some were kind. Some were not. By the time I turned 35, I was one of the senior managers in the marketing department. I handled our biggest account, a global retail client worth several $1,000,000 a year. It wasn't easy, but I loved the work. I loved the people on my team, the feeling of being part of something that mattered. Then came the new VP, Ethan Cole. He joined after our previous VP retired, and everything changed. Ethan was charming, ambitious, and liked to be seen as the smartest person in the room. At first, I thought he was fine. He complimented me on my organizational skills and said he looked forward to learning how things run around here. But I noticed something: he never really listened. He liked ideas, but only if they came from him. He started making small changes. He moved people around, cut budgets, replaced longtime vendors with few of those decisions. He smiled and said, "We'll get you up to speed with how we do things now." I remember telling my coworker, Julia, something about him doesn't feel right. She agreed, but told me to stay quiet. "He's got the CEO's ear," she said. "Just keep your head down." So I did. For months, I kept doing my job, training new staff, handling clients, fixing problems. And I didn't complain, even when Ethan took credit for my ideas in meetings. Then came the mistake. At least, that's what they called it. underscore 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 underscore. It started one Friday afternoon. I got an urgent email from the client, the big one I handled personally. They had received a pricing proposal with confidential numbers that didn't make sense. Numbers that were supposed to be internal. They attached the email they'd received. It looked like it had come from our company domain, signed with my name. I remember staring at it in disbelief. The signature block was mine. The writing even sounded like me. But I hadn't written it. I went straight to IT. They looked into it and said the email was sent from a spoofed address, basically. Someone faked it. They told me not to worry and that they'd report it to security. So I trusted them. I went home that night thinking it would all be sorted out. But on Monday morning, there were whispers. People were avoiding eye contact. I got called into Ethan's office. He looked serious, too serious. "We need to talk about the client data incident," he said. "There's evidence that your login credentials were used." My heart dropped. I tried to explain everything, that IT said it was spoofed, that I never sent anything. He just nodded slowly, taking notes. "We'll investigate," he said. "In the meantime, don't discuss this with anyone." I left his office shaking. I didn't tell anyone except Julia, who hugged me and said,
Deep down,
"They can't
I was
possibly
scared.
think you'd do
Days
that." Passed. Then a week. Then another. No one said much. But I could feel it, something was shifting. People stopped including me in meetings. My name was missing from new project emails. And Ethan started taking over communication with my client. I tried to stay calm. I told myself that truth always wins in the end. But I was wrong. Underscore 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 underscore. When HR called me in that morning, I already knew something was off. I just didn't expect it to be the end. I didn't expect them to say the words, "terminated effective immediately." They said the evidence pointed to my laptop being used. That my password had been entered at 11:42 p.m. on a Friday night. I told them I was at home. I showed them my phone GPS logs. I hadn't even logged in. But they said, "It doesn't matter. The client lost trust, and we have to act." I left the building in a fog. I drove home and sat in my car for hours, not even turning off the engine. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, thinking about everything, the years, the loyalty, the birthdays I missed for work. When I finally went inside, I looked around my apartment. It was filled with pieces of that job, awards, thank you notes, souvenirs from business trips. They all felt like lies now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation with Ethan, every meeting, every decision I'd made. Something didn't add up. Why had he suddenly taken over my client account right before this happened? Why did IT never send me the final report? Why did HR act so quickly, without even asking for my side in writing? Then I remembered something Ethan said a few weeks before. We were in a meeting with the CEO, discussing growth targets. He said, if we can bring that client fully in-house, I didn't think much of it. Our margin. But now it clicked. He had wanted full control of that account, and I had been in the way. That thought stayed with me all night. It hurt, but it also lit a small fire inside me. If he could lie and take everything I built, I could at least find the truth. I didn't want revenge, not really. At least, not then. I wanted justice. I wanted to clear my name. And I didn't know it yet. But the path to doing that, the quiet, careful steps I'd take next, would lead me somewhere I never imagined. Somewhere powerful. Because as much as they tried to erase me, I still had something they didn't. I had relationships. I had trust. And I had the one thing they couldn't fake. After I was fired were the hardest. I woke up every morning thinking I still had work to do, emails to check, reports to finish. Then I'd remember there was no job waiting for me. Only silence. At first, I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the apartment, organized drawers, cooked meals I didn't really eat. But my mind always went back to that one question. Who really sent that email? One evening, Julia called. She sounded nervous. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said, but they've already replaced you. Ethan promoted one of his new hires to handle your client. I felt that familiar sting in my chest. Already? I asked. She sighed. Yeah, they said the client agreed to it, too. That was the moment I realized I had lost more than a job. I had lost the trust of someone I respected deeply, my client, Mason and Ward Retail Group. Their CEO, Michael Ward, had been one of my biggest supporters. He always told me, "You're the reason we stay with your company. You actually care." I couldn't believe he'd just accepted my firing without a word. It didn't sound like him. So after a few days of thinking, I decided to reach out. Just a short, polite message. Hi Michael, I hope you're well. I wanted to thank you for all the years we worked together. I understand things have changed recently, but I wish you continued success. Emma. I didn't expect a reply. But he wrote back the next morning. Emma, I was sorry to hear what happened. I was told you moved on voluntarily. I had no idea there was an issue. Can we talk? I just sat there staring at the screen. He didn't even know. They had lied to him too. We spoke later that afternoon. His voice was warm but confused. He said, Ethan told us you left for personal reasons, that you'd been planning it for months. I explained everything carefully without sounding bitter. How I'd been accused, how IT said it was a spoof, how HR never gave me a chance. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, that doesn't sound like you at all. Let me check something. After the call, I sat there shaking. It was the first time in weeks someone had believed me. Someone with power. A few days later, he called again. I looked into that email, he said. Our IT confirmed it didn't come from your address. The metadata was altered. Whoever sent it used a dummy account through an external vendor. He paused. The vendor that your company hired last quarter, the one Ethan brought in. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. There it was. Proof, or at least something close. But I didn't say anything right away. I thanked him, told him I appreciated his help, and hung up. Then I sat in silence for a long time, thinking. If I went public with that information, it could get messy. They'd deny it, twist it, make it sound like I was bitter. I'd seen how companies protect themselves. But maybe I didn't have to fight them directly. Maybe I could use what I knew carefully, quietly, to take back what was mine. Underscore 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 underscore. A week later, I started rebuilding. I updated my resume, but I didn't send it anywhere yet. Instead, I started reaching out to old contacts, people I'd worked with years ago, clients who'd moved to new companies. Not to ask for a job, just to reconnect. I'd send small messages. Hi, just checking in. How have you been? Most of them remembered me fondly. Some even asked what I was working on now. When I said I was between projects, a few said, let me know if you ever start something new. That phrase stuck with me, start something new. At first, I brushed it off. I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was a team player, a manager. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I knew clients, I knew vendors, and all the quiet details that made campaigns succeed. And most importantly, I knew how to treat people, how to make them feel seen. Maybe losing my job wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something I hadn't dared to dream before. Underscore 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 underscore. But before I could move forward, I needed closure. I needed to understand how Ethan had pulled it off. So I called Julia again, and this time she didn't hold back. She told me that Ethan had quietly moved one of his own associates into the IT department a few months before the incident. That person had admin-level access, meaning they could see everything. And the night before the fake email went out, there had been a system update on the server. The next morning, the security logs were missing. It's like they cleaned up after themselves, Julia said. Then she lowered her voice. Emma, I think he framed you. The words didn't even sound real. Framed. It felt like something out of a movie, not real life. But the pieces fit. Too perfectly. I asked her why she was telling me this. She said, because it's wrong. And because you deserve better. That night I cried. Not out of anger, but release. For weeks, I'd been carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. Now, I finally knew it wasn't my fault. Underscore 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 underscore. Days turned into weeks. I began to find a quiet rhythm again. Morning walks, journaling, coffee without rush. I started making notes, not revenge plans, just ideas. What kind of clients I wanted to work with, what values mattered to me, how I could build something honest. It felt like therapy. Then, out of the blue, Michael called again. He said, I've been thinking. If you're not with your old company anymore, would you ever consider working with us directly? But he clarified. We're considering switching agencies. We're tired of the politics. We'd rather work with someone who actually understands us, like you. My heart skipped a beat. It was everything I'd lost, coming back in a different form. I told him I'd think about it. Then I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling. Could I really do it? Start my own agency? Compete against the company that fired me? The idea scared me, but it also filled me with a strange excitement. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning I made a list. It was simple. 1. Check legal boundaries. 2. Secure a small business license. 3. Build a name and identity. 4. Reconnect with vendors I trust. 5. Reach out quietly to clients. I spent days researching, calling people, setting things up. I called it Northlight Marketing. It felt right, calm, steady, hopeful. Within a month, I had a basic website and a plan. I wasn't rich, but I had savings enough to get started. When I told Michael, he smiled over the phone. That's the Emma I remember, he said. Send me a proposal. Let's make this official. It didn't feel like revenge yet. It felt like reclaiming something I'd lost, my dignity. But deep down, I knew what this meant. If he moved his account to me, it would be a huge blow to Ethan and the company. It was their biggest client. Their crown jewel. Underscore 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 underscore. Before I sent the proposal, I needed to be sure I was doing the right thing. So I called Lisa, my old boss, the one who had hired me years ago. She had retired, but we still talked now and then. I told her everything, the firing, the fake email, Ethan, the offer. She was quiet for a while. Then she said softly, Emma, you've always been the kind of person who builds, not destroys. Don't think of this as revenge. One rainy afternoon, think of it as almost 2 years to the day since I was fired, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single note. I'm sorry for what I did. You didn't deserve it. I stared at it for a long time. It had to be Ethan. There was no one else it could be. For a moment, I felt old feelings rise, the humiliation, the anger, the sleepless nights. Then they faded. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need anything from him anymore. Not even an apology. I had already forgiven him, quietly, somewhere along the way. Not for his sake, but for mine. Because forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about letting yourself breathe again. Underscore 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 underscore. That evening, I walked through the park near my apartment. The air smelled like rain and wet grass. I sat on a bench, closed my eyes, and let the wind brush against my face. I thought about the woman I was 2 years ago, scared, broken, lost. And the woman I'd become, calm, grounded, free. If I could speak to that younger version of myself, I'd tell her, don't rush to fix everything. Some pain has to unfold on its own before it teaches you what it needs to. I'd tell her, you will be okay. Better than okay. Because I was. Underscore 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 underscore. Sometimes, people ask me if I ever regret what happened, losing my job, going through all that pain. I used to say yes. But now I see it differently. I lost a job, yes. But I found myself. And that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. His company was struggling. Losing clients. Losing trust. And now he wanted to align himself with the person he'd destroyed. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I simply replied, I appreciate the thought, Ethan. But I'm focused on my clients right now. Maybe another time. And that was it. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not triumph, not anger. Just peace. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. I didn't plan to take revenge. I only wanted the truth. But life has a way of balancing things when you stay patient. Ethan was eventually investigated for mismanagement. Apparently, the board discovered discrepancies in vendor payments, the same vendor who had sent the fake email. He quietly resigned before things got public. I never celebrated his downfall. I just kept moving forward. My company grew. My team flourished. And I built a life I never could have imagined back then. Sometimes I still think about that day, the rain, the cold faces, the moment everything fell apart. But now it doesn't hurt the same way. It feels like a turning point. A reminder that sometimes losing everything is what after I'd been fired when I received an email that changed everything again. It was from Julia. Can we meet? There's something you should know. It's important. I agreed, even though a part of me wanted to leave that world behind. But something in her message sounded urgent. We met at a small cafe on the east side, one of those quiet places where people sip tea and talk in whispers. She looked nervous, checking over her shoulder as if someone might see us. Emma, she said softly, Ethan's gone. He resigned last week. I nodded. I heard. She leaned closer. That's not all. The board started an internal audit. They found emails. Real ones. From his account. My heart started to pound. What kind of emails? She hesitated, then said, one showing he planned the whole thing, framing you, manipulating IT, even coaching people on what to say if anyone asked questions. I just sat there. Silent. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part of me felt nothing at all. It was like my mind couldn't process it. She continued, they didn't want it public. They settled it quietly. He gave up his shares and walked away with a non-disclosure deal. She looked at me with sad eyes. I thought you deserved to know. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. It was all I could manage. When I walked home that evening, the city lights felt different, softer somehow. I thought about all those months I'd spent blaming myself, wondering what I'd done wrong. And now I finally knew the truth. I hadn't failed. I sat by the window, watching the rain again, the same kind of soft drizzle from that day long ago. Except this time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I realized something. People can take your job, your reputation, even your confidence for a while. But they can't take your integrity unless you give it away. And I hadn't. I went to bed early, slept through the night for the first time in months, and woke up with a sense of quiet clarity. I knew what I needed to do next. Underscore 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 underscore. The following week, I reached out to HR. The same department that had escorted me out with that cold, polite tone. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted the truth on record. I sent a short, calm message. Dear HR, I recently learned new information regarding the incident from last year that led to my termination. I believe it's important to clarify certain details for your records. I'd be happy to provide documentation should you wish to update my employment file. Sincerely, Emma Rhodes. 2 days later, I got a reply from the HR director, a different one this time. She asked if I could come in for a meeting. When I walked back into that building, everything felt smaller. The reception desk, the halls, even the conference room. Maybe because I wasn't afraid anymore. The new HR director was kind, direct. She apologized on behalf of the company. Apparently, the board had confirmed internal misconduct by Ethan, but they weren't allowed to disclose details due to legal agreements. She said quietly, "We know what happened wasn't your fault." I'm sorry it took so long. I nodded. Then she asked, "Would you like us to update your file and issue a written statement?" Then said, "Yes." That would mean a lot. They did. A week later, I received a formal letter stating I had been wrongfully terminated due to actions taken by a former executive. No drama, no headlines, just truth on paper. When I held that letter in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, closure. The quiet kind that feels like a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. A few months later, something unexpected happened again. The CEO of my old company, the one who had trusted Ethan so blindly, reached out. He wanted to meet. We met at a restaurant downtown. He looked older than I remembered, tired, maybe even regretful. "Emma," he said, "I owe you an apology. We failed you. I failed you." I didn't know what to say. He continued, "I trusted the wrong person, and it cost us more than we realized. You were one of the best we had." I looked at him and saw sincerity in his eyes. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just understanding. I told him I've made peace with it. It pushed me to start something I never would have otherwise. He smiled gently. "Northlight, right? I've heard good things. You're doing incredible work." That meant more than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because it closed a circle. The people who once doubted me now saw me for who I truly was, not a mistake, not a scapegoat, but a survivor who built something real. Later that evening, as I walked home, I thought about how strange life can be. The very moment that had broken me had also been the one that set my future in motion. If I hadn't been fired, I never would have built my own company. I never would have discovered how strong I really was. And I never would have learned the power of quiet persistence. Sometimes, what feels like the end is just the start of that meeting. My company got invited to a major industry conference, the kind I used to attend representing my old employer. Now, I'd be speaking on stage as the founder of Northlight. The night before the event, I stood in my hotel room, rehearsing my speech. It wasn't about success or revenge. It was about resilience. About how people can rebuild even when everything seems lost. When I walked onto that stage the next day, the lights were bright, the room full. As I began to speak, I spotted a few familiar faces in the audience, including Julia. She smiled proudly. I told the crowd, sometimes, we don't get to control what happens to us. But we do get to decide what we build from it. The room went silent for a moment, that kind of stillness that means people are really listening. When the session ended, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, just like I used to when I started out. She said, "I'm going through something similar right now. I thought my career was over. Hearing your story gave me hope." I smiled and said, "It's never over when you still have your integrity. That's the one thing they can't take." Her eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was for anyone who'd ever been unfairly blamed, betrayed, or forgotten, anyone who needed to remember their worth. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. A few weeks later, I got a message from Julia again. She had left the company too and joined a new firm. She said, "I'm happier now. I learned from watching you. You can always start again." That made me smile. Because that's what it all came down to, starting again. Not from anger, but from truth. I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed to live my life honestly, so I did just that. I wrote the proposal carefully. Transparent pricing. Honest terms. No fancy promises, just clear, solid work. A week later, Michael signed the contract. Just like that, Northlight Marketing had its first major client. I remember staring at the email confirmation and feeling tears in my eyes. Not just joy, relief. Because after months of pain, I had found a way to turn it into purpose. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. Of course, word spread fast. A few weeks later, Julia called again, whispering like she was sharing a secret. "Ethan is furious," she said. "He found out Mason and Ward left, and the CEO's demanding answers." I didn't say anything, just listened. Part of me felt bad for the team still there. They didn't deserve the chaos. But another part of me, the quiet, wounded part, felt peace. They had taken everything from me, and now I had taken back what was mine. Still, I never bragged or gloated. I just worked. Harder than ever. The first campaign we launched under Northlight went better than I could have imagined. Michael's team was thrilled. They told me, "This feels like how things used to be." That meant everything. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. But success brought attention. Soon, other clients started reaching out. Small ones at first, businesses that had heard I'd gone independent. They wanted the same care and honesty they remembered. Within 6 months, I had to hire 2 assistants. Within a year, 5. And then, something unexpected happened. Ethan called me. His voice was calm, but forced. "Emma," he said, "I wanted to congratulate you on your new company. Seems like you're doing well." I could almost hear the tension behind his smile. Thank you, I said politely. Then he added, we should catch up sometime.
A full year passed
Maybe
after
discuss
that letter from
Ethan. By then, Northlight had grown into something I could hardly believe. We had 10 employees, 2 interns, and a bright little office with big windows that let in morning light. Sometimes I'd arrive early, open the blinds, and just stand there for a while, watching the city wake up. I loved that ritual. It reminded me how far I'd come from the day I stood in the rain with a box in my hands. Back then, I thought my world had ended. Now, every sunrise felt like proof that it hadn't. It had only changed shape. Underscore 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 underscore. Work no longer felt like survival. It felt like service. We built campaigns that actually told people's stories instead of selling empty promises. I kept the team small and close, like a family. Every Friday, we had coffee together before diving into meetings. I used to tell them, we don't chase clients, we build trust. They laughed and said I sounded like a quote on a poster, but I could tell they believed it. One morning, our designer, Mia, came into my office holding her tablet. She said, Emma, look at this. Mason and Ward's new numbers came in. Our campaign boosted their sales by 23%. Her eyes sparkled. I smiled. That's wonderful, Mia. You did that. Moments like that filled me more than any award ever could. Because they came from honesty, not ambition. Underscore 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 underscore. But even as life moved forward, sometimes the past knocked softly on the door. A conference invitation from someone I once worked with. An old colleague connecting on LinkedIn. Each reminder carried a faint echo of who I used to be. At first, those echoes stung. Then they started to feel like gentle waves, part of me, but Julia visited the new office. She brought cupcakes and a huge smile. Look at you, she said, laughing. Boss lady now. I laughed too. Still just Emma. We sat by the window, eating cupcakes and talking about life. She told me she was leading a small team at her new job, and that she tried to run it the way I used to, patient, kind, but firm when it mattered. That made me proud in a way I can't quite describe. Before she left, she said quietly, you know, you changed how I see work. It's not just about winning anymore. It's about doing things right. I hugged her and whispered, that's the best compliment I could ever get. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, after everyone went home, I stayed late finishing a proposal. When I closed my laptop, I noticed the reflection in the window, me, older, steadier, smiling softly. For the first time, I realized I liked who I saw. I used to think success meant constant movement, deadlines, meetings, promotions. Now I knew it meant peace of mind. Being able to look at yourself and think, I didn't betray who I am to get here. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a university seminar for young professionals. The theme was integrity in the workplace. I almost said no. Public speaking still made me nervous. But something in me wanted to give back, to pass on what I'd learned the hard way. When I stood in front of that classroom, I looked at their eager faces and saw a bit of myself in each of them, full of hope, maybe a little fear. I told them my story, but simply no drama, no bitterness. Just the truth about how easily things can fall apart and how slowly they can come back together. One student asked, "How did you keep going when people believed the worst about you?" I smiled gently. Because I decided I would rather live with the truth and no job than with a lie and a title. Afterward, several stayed behind to thank me. One girl said, "I've been scared to speak up about something unfair at my internship. Hearing you makes me think I should." I told her, "Speak with respect, but don't stay silent. Silence only protects the wrong people." As I left the campus, I felt lighter. It was as if telling my story out loud had released the last bit of pain still hiding inside me. Underscore 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 underscore. Around that same time, I reconnected with Lisa again. She came to visit the office, bringing her usual calm energy. We sat with tea, talking about everything: work, life, aging, peace. She said, "You remind me of myself when I finally stopped trying to prove I belonged." I asked, "When did that happen for you?" She smiled. "When I realized belonging isn't given. It's built, day by day, by being yourself." That stayed with me. Underscore 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 underscore. Northlight kept growing, but I promised myself it would never become a place like the one that broke me. So we created small traditions: open feedback days, shared lunches, mental health Fridays once a month. Little things that reminded everyone that we were humans first, employees second. Sometimes, when new hires asked how the company started, I'd give the short version. "I lost a job I loved," I'd say, "but it taught me how to build something better." They usually smiled, not realizing the weight behind those words. But that was fine. They didn't need to know every detail. All that mattered was that the lesson lived on through the way we worked together. Then, one afternoon, I got a surprise visitor, Michael Ward. He came to the office with his usual calm confidence. He looked around, impressed. "This place feels alive," he said, and he told me about their new global expansion plans. Then he looked at me and said, "I want Northlight to lead it. You've earned our trust 100 times over." I blinked, taken aback. It would be the biggest project of my career. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Completely." After he left, I stood there for a long time, feeling gratitude more than excitement. Because what mattered wasn't the contract, it was the journey that brought me here. Every sleepless night, every doubt, every small step toward healing. Underscore 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 underscore. When I got home that evening, I poured a cup of tea and sat on the balcony. The sky was pink with sunset. I thought about my parents, about the people who had supported me quietly when I couldn't even support myself. I whispered a little thank you to the universe. Sometimes closure doesn't come with loud moments. It comes softly, when you realize you've outgrown the pain that once defined you. Underscore 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 underscore. A few weeks later, I attended an industry gala. It wasn't my usual scene, but Northlight had been nominated for a creativity award, and my team insisted I go. As fate would have it, I saw someone I didn't expect there, the old CEO of my former company. He spotted me and walked over, smiling politely. "Emma," he said, "I wanted to tell you again how proud I am of what you've built." "Thank you," I said, genuinely. He hesitated, then added, "You're proof that good people can still win." That simple sentence meant more than any trophy. Because once I'd believed the opposite, that only the loud, the cunning, the ruthless got ahead. When the award was announced, Northlight won. My team cheered, cameras flashed. As I walked up to accept it, I felt calm instead of nervous. On stage, I said, "This award belongs to everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough, and kept showing up anyway." The room applauded gently, not wildly, but warmly. And in that warmth, I felt years of hurt finally dissolve. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a walk before work. The city was quiet, just a few people out. I passed by the building where I used to work, the one that had once felt like my entire world. I stopped and looked at it for a long moment. The windows were different now, the sign had changed. But in my heart, I said goodbye, properly this time. Not with tears, but with peace. "Thank you," I whispered, "for ending when you did. Because if it hadn't, I might never have found this life, one built on truth, courage, and kindness." Over time, I realized revenge was never really what I wanted. What I wanted was balance. And life, in its slow, quiet way, had given it to me. Ethan's choices had cost him everything. My choices had given me everything I needed. That was enough. I didn't need to win bigger, faster, louder. I just needed to keep living in a way that felt honest. That was my real victory. One evening, after everyone left the office, I found myself looking through old files on my laptop. Among them was a folder labeled Dreams. Inside was a note I'd written the week after I was fired, a letter to myself. It said, "Dear Emma, one day this pain will make sense. One day you'll thank life for pushing you out of a place that no longer saw your worth. Keep your heart soft. Keep your back straight. You'll build something beautiful, just wait." Reading it brought tears to my eyes. Because that day had come. A few months later, and yes, Northlight moved into a larger office. On the wall near the entrance, we hung a simple framed quote. "Do what's right, even when no one is watching." Every morning, as I walked past it, I felt grounded again. It reminded me of the promise I made to myself, to never let fear or bitterness guide me. Because success without integrity is just another form of loss. Around the same time, I started volunteering at a local career mentoring program. Once a week, I'd meet young women navigating their first jobs, trying to find their voices in busy offices. I listened to their worries, being overlooked, being blamed, being scared to speak. I told them, "Your voice matters even if it shakes. Especially if it shakes." They'd smile, and I could see the spark of hope in their eyes. Maybe that was my real purpose all along, to use my story to help others keep theirs. On the second anniversary of Northlight's founding, my team surprised me with a small celebration. They'd made a scrapbook with photos, quotes, and letters from clients. At the back was a page that said, "Thank you for believing in people when others didn't." I couldn't speak for a moment. I just smiled and hugged them all. Because that was it, that was the ending I never knew I wanted. Not revenge. Not recognition. Just the knowledge that kindness still works. That night, after everyone went home, I stayed behind one last time. I turned off the lights, sat by the window, and whispered a quiet prayer, not asking for anything, just saying thank you. Thank you for the pain that taught me strength. Thank you for the betrayal that taught me truth. Thank you for the ending that became my beginning. Then I locked the door and walked out into the cool night air. Since that morning when I walked out of my old company with a box in my hands. Sometimes, when I look back, it almost feels like someone else's life. Like a movie I once watched and carried with me, not because it was perfect, but because it changed me. I used to replay every detail in my head, the meeting, the words, the humiliation. I used to wonder what I could have done differently. Now, I rarely think about it. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned to remember differently. Pain doesn't disappear. It just becomes quieter, like a song that fades into the background until all that's left is the memory of the melody. Underscore 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 underscore. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave them, the ones who fired me, the ones who stayed silent, the ones who turned away. And the truth is, yes, but not all at once. Forgiveness wasn't a grand moment, it was a series of small choices. Choosing not to hate when I easily could. Choosing to sleep peacefully instead of replaying the past. Choosing to focus on what I could build instead of what I'd lost. One day, I realized I hadn't thought about them in months. And that's when I knew I'd truly let go. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. Now, when I talk to people going through hard times at work, people who've been treated unfairly or cast aside, I tell them this. You don't need to destroy anyone to heal. You just need to stop giving them your peace. Because peace is everything. It's what makes you breathe easier, think clearer, live softer. And in a world that often rewards loudness and cruelty, keeping your heart kind. I visited my parents for dinner. My dad asked me if I was happy. I thought for a moment and said, yes, I am. Not every day, not all the time, but in the ways that matter. He smiled and said, then you've made it. And maybe that's what success really is, not money, not titles, not revenge. Just being able to say I'm at peace with my story. Sometimes, when I walk through the city and see people rushing to meetings, holding phones, wearing stress like a badge, I silently wish them calm. Because I remember what that used to feel like, the pressure, the fear of falling behind. And I wish someone had told me sooner that falling behind isn't the same as failing. Sometimes it's just life giving you space to find your real path. If I could go back and speak to the version of me who cried in the rain that day, I'd hold her shoulders and say, you don't see it yet, but this ending will save you. You'll lose everything you thought you needed, only to discover what truly matters. You'll find your courage. You'll find your voice. And one day, you'll sit in the sunlight, smiling at how far you've come. Because I did. And that's the gift pain gives us. It teaches us who we are when everything else is taken away. As for Northlight, it continues to grow, but I never let it lose its heart. Every new hire hears the same story, not about revenge, but about resilience. I tell them, this company was built on truth. That's our foundation. And maybe that's all I ever wanted, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove that goodness can still win in a hard world. So, if you're listening to this and you've been wronged, or blamed, or pushed aside, I want you to know this. You are not your worst day. You are not your mistakes, or even the mistakes others put on you. You are what you choose to do next. You can rise quietly. You can rebuild. You can forgive without forgetting. And one day, your peace will be the loudest thing about you. I don't wish anyone harm. I just wish them growth, the kind that makes them see the truth the way I finally did. Because when the storm clears, what's left isn't revenge. It's clarity. And in that clarity, I found something better than payback. I found freedom.